And then they rigged me up with this Justin fucking Bieber mic. So strap yourselves in. So they told me to talk about myself. I am not from Kansas. I am from St. Louis. Well, I grew up outside of St. Louis. I've lived in Dogtown for a couple years now, around the area, Central West End. I got my start in beer. I was working right out of college in an insurance company. I doubt any of you are familiar with it, Fireman's Fund Insurance. It's very boring, just like the job is. So I decided very quickly that I did not want to be a cubicle rat. I hated that fucking job. But I still stayed there for 5 years, trying to figure out how I was going to get out and get into beer. Well, I kind of got into beer while I was going there by going, I'm sure you're all familiar with the Wine and Cheese Place in Clayton. So around 2007, I started working at the insurance job, and I was driving back and forth to Earth City is where it was at the time. Every week I'd stop at Wine and Cheese Place. Every Friday they had those beer tastings. I would buy about $40 or $50 in beer, as you can see. And that's how I ended up trying hundreds of beers after a couple years. So I was sitting at my desk thinking about how much I hated my life in insurance, and I decided that I was going to try and find a way out of that by maybe getting my foot in the door as a bartender. So I did a little Craigslist search, found a couple of naughty things on there. But I found that ITAP at the time, which was only in Chesterfield, was opening one in Soulard, and they were looking for bartenders. So I sent them an email. My email had a picture of me, and it said, I don't look good in a bikini, and I don't know how to make a pina colada, but I do know every style of beer glass and what beer goes in that glass. Long story short, I ended up getting hired there. So I was bartending on weekends and working full-time still in insurance. So that was a rough 4 years as far as giving up my weekends to do that. But it does pay off eventually. So I did that for 4 years, and then are any of you familiar with Fields Foods in Lafayette Square? I did the beer set there, so you're welcome. I was the buyer for a short period of time, about 6 months before I took this job with TallGrass. So if anybody ever tells you that hard work doesn't pay off, they're full of shit. So about TallGrass, though. So TallGrass is in Manhattan, Kansas. It was founded in 2007, which is ironically about the time that I started getting into beer. Founded by Jeff Gill. He was also in a job that he hated. He was an environmental geologist, which sounds even more boring than insurance, if that's possible. He tells the story like this to us. He was at dinner one night with his wife and some friends. Well, the friends, one guy had a PhD in pebbles, another guy had a PhD in dirt or something, and he was sitting there and was like, what the fuck am I doing with my life? So his wife asked him, if you could do whatever you wanted to do, what would you do? Well, he was an avid home brewer, and he said, well, I would start a brewery. So they decided to make a commitment to it. His wife supported it fully, which meant uprooting their family and moving to, they decided to do it in Manhattan, Kansas. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of it, K-State. They call it the Little Apple. Whenever I talk to him, I joke and say it's the city that goes to bed at 9 or 10, sometimes midnight on the weekends. But yeah, they decided to go there because supposedly the water source, it's in the Flint Hills, which if you've never been, to many parts of Kansas, it's actually not all flat. There are hills. It's in the Flint Hills, and supposedly the water source is great. So they chose to put the brewery there. Jeff continued working full-time, much like I did, and gathered all the information that he could in his free time to start a brewery. And his wife and him just made the commitment to do it, and here we are today. So a lot of people ask, well, a lot of people don't ask anymore because everybody wants to do cans now. They're so sexy. We were some of the first ones to go all cans, 2010. So being an environmental geologist, he kind of, still has nerdy qualities about him. So he got a call from a guy in western Kansas that had about 20 cases of IPA, TallGrass IPA bottles and cardboard boxes that he couldn't recycle because there was no one recycling in the area apparently. So he asked what he could do with them. Well, it wasn't economical for us to go get them. So we decided, Jeff started looking into it, and he found that there's really no reason not to can anymore, which a lot of people are finding. They have the stigma, it's about 20 years old, that they impart some sort of flavor on the beer. Most newer cans have a lining, kind of a water lining on the inside, that's not an issue. So there's really no reason not to, because they keep the beer fresher, they keep sunlight out. It's basically a mini keg, and beside that point, about 50% of all cans, aluminum cans out there at this point are getting recycled, and it only takes about 60 days for that can to go from the shelf to you, back to the recycling and back to the shelf. So it's a very quick process. And besides that, they're lighter, easier to ship, more economical. So he made the choice that he was going to go all cans with a lot of pushback at that point. So now, like I said, you're seeing 4 hands going to cans. I actually just saw an announcement today that Firestone Walker is going to start doing cans. I saw last week that Boulevard is doing cans. So I think it's really a wave of things that you're going to see happening more and more. But anyway, it's also nice that I like to have a 16-ounce can here, because a lot of people are against the 16-ounce, but I really I can't see a reason why you wouldn't want the extra 4 ounces. People go out, and I have bars tell me that they have a harder time selling 16-ounce cans, and I'm like, what? I mean, you have 12-ounce cans up there, and they want less beer. So, yeah. So the brewery decided to do all cans. We had a couple of beers starting out that you probably don't remember. Well, does anybody remember TallGrass Oasis? Anything like that? That one was the most recent one to go away, the Imperial ESB. We also had TallGrass Cold. It was a Kolsch lager. Things like that. So right now we've got a lot of beers coming out, and I don't know, has anybody seen the new feast, this most recent feast from this month? We are in the middle of building a new brewery, so it is actually almost nearing completion. It's a $7.5 million brewery expansion. Right now we're running about 17,000 barrels. I think we'll finish off last year at about 17,000 was the final number. As soon as the new brewery turns on in April, we're going to go up directly to about 40,000 with the ability to go up to about 70,000 barrels without construction. So we're going to have a lot of new beers coming out, some of which I can talk about. If you've seen our 8-bit, our most popular beer, which I think we're going to be tasting first here in a second, we are going to be doing a 16-bit. So it's going to have Sega-style graphics on the can. It's going to be a double pale. I know a lot of you are going to say there's no such thing as a double pale. Well, now there is. So it is going to be 6.2% alcohol, and it's going to have even more of a Galaxy profile to it, because this one's got Galaxy hops, which I'm going to talk about here in a second. But it's going to have really cool Sega-style graphics on the can. It's going to be I tell people 8-bit, whenever you get to try it, is we call it an American Pale Ale, but it's basically like a session IPA. It's only about 2 IBUs difference than a lot of the more popular ones that you're probably familiar with, and it's 5.2%. So I like to joke and tell people that 16-bit is going to be a double session ale for those that want a session but don't have time. So it's a perfect power lunch beer. Obviously, this is a bunch of beer nerds if you thought that was funny, because my girlfriend hates that joke. Which reminds me, how many of you are members of St. Louis Beer Enthusiasts on Facebook? God, you guys provide so much entertainment for me. Man. No, I'm just kidding. No, I'm a member too. I post on there avidly. But besides that, we're going to have a new one coming out in the summer called Ginger Peach Saison. That's not the actual name. I'm trying to get it to be called James and the Ginger Peach, and I would like my face to actually be on the peach. So I'm still working on that one. And the more exciting stuff, we are going to be coming out with limited release beers, and they will be coming out in 19.2 ounce cans. You're probably not familiar with 19.2s besides the fact that Oscar Blues uses them for Mama's Little Yellow Pills and Dale's Pale Ale. A lot of people ask why 19.2 ounce cans. It's a pretty simple answer. It's our canning line can do 12, 16, or 19.2 ounce cans. So we're not AB. We don't have millions of dollars to buy a new canning line, so they're going to be 19.2 ounce cans. So the first one you'll see in May. Are any of you familiar with Velvet Rooster, our Belgian Tripel? There is going to be a rye barrel-aged version of that. It's going to be called Wooden Rooster. It's going to be aged in Dark Horse Distilleries out of Kansas City. They have the Reunion Rye, which is a very awesome rye whiskey if you've never had it. After that, coming out later in the year, we're going to have Bourbon Barrel Buffalo Sweat. Yeah. It's also going to be aged in their bourbon barrels from Dark Horse Distillery. And then last, I don't know if any of you have ever had it. It actually was part of the test market here in St. Louis was Big Rick, that's RICC, Russian Imperial Chocolate Coffee Stout. So that'll be a good one. That'll be, I think, at the end of next year. So besides that, some of our other beers that we're not tasting today, Halcyon is getting ready to come back out. A lot of people say, oh, wheat, it's a wheat, I don't want to drink it. Well, guess what? It's citra hopped. And then everybody perks their ears up because we all love Citra hops, or at least you should. Halcyon has been Citra hop. We actually use the hop bursting technique with it, where you're bursting at the end to give it that flavor, which we'll kind of talk about here with 8-bit. So I assume since I have my beer, everybody has their beer. I'm going to take a little sip just because I'm parched. All right, so 8-bit. It is a Galaxy hopped American Pale Ale. Galaxy hops come out of Australia, if you're familiar with them. They're actually kind of a hard hop to get. We were the first ones to bring it to market, and then you saw some other breweries start using them. You see it in O'Fallon's Zeke's Pale Ale, Schlafly IPA, things like that. Galaxy hops kind of give the beer you kind of get that almost like a melon tropical fruit aroma rather than like citrusy like American hops. Does everybody pick that up a little bit? It's kind of it's a little bit take. Now besides the Galaxy hops, there are American hops in there to give it a little bit of different flavor. It's got Centennial, Cascade, and Magnum in there as well. Your basic malts. It actually has our signature malt is Victory, Vienna, and Munich. You'll find those kind of used throughout a lot of our beers to give it that continuity of taste. So, cheers everybody. Does anybody hate it? I always ask that question first. Good answer. So yeah, 16-bit that will be coming out later in the year is going to have a little bit more malt to it, so it's going to have kind of almost like a creamier finish, kind of like a lager or something would. It's going to have more pronounced Galaxy hops profile to it, though. This beer, obviously, I'll do a couple little fun facts about this beer. So obviously it's got what looks like Pac-Man on there. So Pac-Man is the most recognizable icon in the world. I'm not sure if you knew that. Crosses all boundaries, a lot of ages. Second interesting fact, Pac-Man is not trademarked. So it is tweaked, but it's not in fact trademarked. So dumb on them. Besides that, it is also hop rocketed. So I'm sure who's familiar with Randalizer. Our hop rocket is actually a giant stainless steel, pretty much Randalizer. So before we shoot the beer into the can, it goes for 6 hours through the hop rocket to go right through the Galaxy hops. That gives it more of the oils, flavors, aromas, things like that that's not in the normal brewing process. It's a little bit different than dry hopping. You get a lot of the same stuff, but it's more imparted on it. I think you suck up a little bit more of the oils out of it just by shooting right through it. It is probably it is the best-selling TallGrass beer. So it is our flagship. They didn't announce that till this year, but it is the flagship. Ethos that you're going to taste next takes a lot of the other malts, hops, and stuff that are in there. Going to have the same malt profile, but a lot more of it. Funny enough, whenever I taste people on these two beers, they sometimes think that 8-bit is hoppier than Ethos, which is not true at all because it doesn't have the malt profile to it. This is going to ring in at 110 IBUs when you taste it. Like I said, 8-bit rings in at 40. So popular beers like Founders All Day IPA ring at about 42. Does anybody have any questions about 8-bit while we're tasting that one? No? Yes. The name came from this is a little fun fact I didn't talk about. Our designer now who did the 8-bit can, he also did Velvet Rooster. He did the Zombie Monkey, if you're familiar with Zombie Monkey. Actually came from Marvel Comics, doing freelance for them. He also did a little bit of freelance for Topps trading cards, stuff like that. So it basically just came from him and the founders sitting around drinking one night. They had the beer and they wanted to realize what they were going to call it, and it's like, well, let's just call it 8-bit Pale Ale because he's a nerd. So it's paid off for us so far. That is. It's like I said, it's a giant stainless steel vessel that literally lays on the ground between the barrels and then the fermenters and then the bright tank. So as it's going into the bright tank, it's shooting through there, and they kind of have a way that it keeps cycling through it. I am not a brewer myself, but it cycles it through it for 6 hours just to kind of keep imparting it, and that's right before they shoot it into the bright tank, and then it gets sent off obviously to the canning line afterwards. So sorry I can't go into that more, but. Anybody else has any questions? Yeah. His name is Neil. I would have to look up his last name. I think it starts with a B. It's not something I have to encounter a lot of the time besides just calling him Neil because we all know who he is. If he goes to a comic book convention, supposedly he has people that line up to see him. And we are talking about doing some of the other new stuff we have coming out next year is we're going to do mix packs with the 8 like these. They're going to be called episodic IPA packs. They're going to have 2 8-bits, 2 16-bits, 2 Ethos, and then each one will have a one-off IPA in it. But then the actual packaging itself will be one-off, like a graphic novel. So we're going to have him do kind of the, like a special one for each one, so they're almost collectible. And he's supposedly going to get some of his friends from Marvel to come in and do some guest starring on things like that. Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, the new brewery will be up and running. The tasting room portion will probably be up in August. We're actually going to start brewing. Well, we're doing water test batches now because, I don't know, if you are brewers, I'm sure you know when you go from a different scale, it takes a lot of effort to change the recipe because the scale itself will change the beer. So going from, we've been running 2 15 barrels systems 24/7, 365 for years now, and now we're going to a couple of 50 barrel fermenters, so just making that larger batch is going to change things a little bit, and plus you have to deal with the differences in water. So, yeah. Does anybody else have any questions about 8-bit before we move on to Ethos? All right. I think she's almost done with Ethos, so I'll just start talking about it. So we called this beer Ethos because when you taste it, it is 110 IBUs. It is 6.8 110 IBU beer. I usually don't tell people that until after they've tasted it because it really is well balanced for 110 IBUs. If I gave you this beer and didn't tell you it was 110 IBUs, would you believe me? No. So that's kind of the name behind it. So our ethos is to always make, good, remarkable beer, but not something that's just going to overwhelm you. We want to make a very well-balanced IPA. So it's kind of the kitchen sink for hops on this one. It's got Cascade, Centennial, Crystal, Columbus, Amarillo, and Willamette. Willamette, damn it. So, what's that? Sure. It's Amarillo. I always do this. Amarillo, Willamette, and then the 4 C's. Crystal, Columbus, Cascade, Centennial. Did I miss one? I think I named 4. So, yeah, it's still confusing sometimes. But yeah, we wanted to make a really well balanced. So we're not going to make a West Coast or an East Coast style IPA. We're in the Midwest, so we wanted to make something that was, we're more modest. So let's make something that's more balanced, that has that punch to it, but doesn't punch you in the face. Let's not punch you in the face. Let's slap your tongue around a little bit. So that was kind of the ethos behind the beer, and we love hops just like everybody else. So this is the beer at the brewery that everybody drinks. It is going to get a little bit of a can redesign so it doesn't look like a fucking burnt road cone. I love our packaging, but no, it is the new. You'll see the new redesign soon, so trust me, it is the same beer. It's going to have more. We're really into teal right now this season, so we're adding more teal to things. We had a lot of success with teal with Zombie Monkey, if you've seen that, the texturized can that has the black and the teal on it. So we're going to give it a little redesign now that we have Neil, our great designer, to do that for us. So I'm going to take a drink of this one. Obviously, unlike the Galaxy, this one's got more of the citrusy aroma to it, all that fun stuff. So it is double dry hopped on this one too, and I believe it's dry hopped with the Columbus, Cascade, the Willamette, and the Amarillo. So only 2 of them are left out of the dry hopping. And it is dry hopped twice, because if you're going to do something once, why not do it again? Anybody have any questions about Ethos? Sure. ABV 6.8%. Yeah. It's up there. We're not calling it a double, so it's going to be interesting with 16 to being 6.2. So we're going to have kind of this was one of a tiered system. We've always been kind of into making the more sessionable beers. We had the Velvet Rooster, Tripel, things like that. Ethos kind of went up on that. Like I said, it's 6.8, so it's one of our higher ones besides the Velvet Rooster. Everything else kind of hovers around 5. One of our more obscure beers, which I actually do really well with here, if anybody's familiar with pub ale, was actually the beer that Jeff started the brewery with. It was originally called TallGrass Ale. Now it's just TallGrass Pub Ale. It's a Northern English Brown or a Northern English Mild if you see it out. It's our lowest one at 4.4%. It's really easy drinking. It's got a nice caramely biscuit note to it. Unlike, like an American Brown is going to be very robust. It's much smoother, much easier to drink. So if you see Pub out, try it for sure, because it's going to be around a little bit more whenever. Do you have a question, Chad? Yeah. Well, yeah, if you have them together, try it. I said when I'm sampling at grocery stores and things, so you don't get the beer nerdery that you. Yeah. Are you trying them? They're completely different. Do you think could you see where someone that I guess has a less developed palate would think that 8-bit is a little bit more bitter than, really? Well, it just has to do with the perception of the malt. But you do you see the continuity in the malt? I mean, every brewery kind of has their signature thing that they keep. Okay, well, you're really going to like the next beers then. See, yeah, it's grapefruity, whereas the other one is a little bit more melon things. There you go, for sure. Yeah, you're definitely going to like the other beers if you're not. And try Pub Ale or something. I usually don't start with the hoppier beers, but if you guys notice this monstrosity down here, this is a Firkin. It is a vanilla bean buffalo sweat, which you're going to try the regular buffalo sweat next. Our most popular seasonal that's out right now, though, is the vanilla bean. So this has had candy cane added to it, so it's a peppermint vanilla bean. I had one at Christmas. It's delicious. Is everybody familiar with the cask? I guess I could talk about it when we get to it. But. Oh, you want me to go ahead and tap it? Sure. Okay, sure. So I'm going to tap this, so you might want to watch out. So the Firkin is a living beer. We were off to a good start before we even started because she wasn't a squirter. The first thing I did. The first thing I did when I came in is I put this spile in to let it vent, because this beer is just added into the cask, and then you add whatever your ingredients. We do all sorts of crazy 8-bit with blueberry and halcyon with pomegranate, whatever you want to throw in there. Basically, you can throw in there. But depending on how much sugar that has, I've had very, very angry Firkins that were squirters. Where'd she go? So you can put the spile in. This is the spile up top here. And it'll basically, I've had them just shoot the moon. So basically you have a geyser of beer coming out that you have to quickly cover up. Luckily we're not having that issue right now. Sure. Yeah, calm down, Alkies. Also, I'm just going to give a caveat here. This is Brian Adams right here. He's a great beer guy. I did not know that we were doing a Firkin tonight, so I didn't bring my personal mallet, so I'm holding his wood here. I've never done this with an all-wood mallet. It's kind of making me nervous, but we're going to do this anyway. So, I don't know that any of you will ever have to do this, but if you ever do, the key to this is don't go in at half-ass. You want to get it right from the beginning. So you just want to square it up, and that's it. Yeah, because I've only seen one person screw it up, but that one screw up meant that faucet shot out and broke the back bar. So, so that's always fun. How many of you have had a cask before? I'm not supposed to be talking about the cask yet, but did you have it out of a firkin or out of an actual cask drive? Both. Well, yeah, there's only a couple places in St. Louis that do actual, Schlafly Tap Room has one. Dressel's has one, which I try to keep them supplied as well as I can. So if you want to ever check it out when that's not an event, but always if you see a cask event, do go out to them, because this is basically only good for, you can get about a day out of them. But like I said, it's a living beer. This is real. They call it real ale. If you ever see the British people have the real ale campaign. There you go, see? Oh, you are a bunch of beer nerds, see? Yeah, so I'll start talking about Buffalo Sweat a little bit while she's passing it out. So Buffalo Sweat has a fun little story behind the name that I'll get to, but this one is an oatmeal cream stout, so it's a milk stout. We don't advertise the milk stout part of it. That really wasn't a big thing whenever we first started making it. It is low, characteristic of a milk stout, it's low ABV at 5%, low bitterness 20%. This is the one, surprisingly, in rural areas that everybody loves. The two people that'll surprise you with this one is middle-aged women in rural areas. I'm just saying. It is, because you always get this stigma, and I know that you guys are all educated beer people, but when I'm sampling at grocery stores, someone will see a dark beer and they're like, ew, that's dark, I don't want that. And I'm like, do you like coffee? And they're like, if they say no, I'm usually like, you're a weirdo if you don't like coffee, so just move on. But if they say they like coffee and they like chocolate, I'm like, well, just try the beer. And 9 times out of 10, they like it. Some of those will stick by the, I don't like dark beer. So you can do the same thing when you're in a rural area, which I've done rural tastings. So you get big biker guy standing there and he doesn't want anything to do with dark beer, and then you just don't bring up the chocolate part. Just say, do you like coffee? And he was like, yeah. So they end up liking it. So this one, fun little fact about this that I discovered, if you want to recreate this right here, what we're going to have, it won't be quite as good because it's not added to it. If you're ever at home and you have a Buffalo Sweat, add a shot of creme de menthe to it. Tastes like a Thin Mint cookie. So, little fun fact. This beer we came out with, I believe 2009 was when we came out with this. So Jeff, our founder, had already had the oatmeal cream stout recipe, and he was trying to figure out a name. You notice a theme here. We come up with beers before we come up with names, but we always have weird names. So he had a few of them and thought it was hilarious, and he said it looks like something a buffalo would sweat. So he soberly took this story back to his wife, and she said, absolutely not, that's the stupidest idea I've ever heard. So about a month passed by, and against his better judgment, I guess he decided to call it Buffalo Sweat anyway. Well, it ended up being a huge success, because, when you see Buffalo Sweat, if you can't see the can, when I go to restaurants and stuff, if you're just looking at a bottle list of names, it's like, oatmeal cream stout, something like that. When you see Zombie Monkey or Buffalo Sweat and you can't literally see the can, aren't you kind of drawn to it a little bit? So he likes to take the chance anytime he can get to this day to remind his wife how much of a good idea that was, and then promptly sleeps on the couch, I guess. So, which I've slept on the couch. It's a very comfortable couch, but it's so a lot of people liken this to, and you guys being beer aficionados, I probably wouldn't. It's liquid brownie. Tastes like you get the nice creaminess out of it. The thing that this is so rich, but it's so light-bodied for a stout. It's surprisingly good in the summer because it's just so. It's not like coating of your tongue. It gives you that. It's an ale, so it coats your tongue and gives you all that. But it's not just so heavy you couldn't even have it on a hot day. It's not any heavier than a Budweiser, is what I tell people. No. So yeah, you get that kind of chocolate chip cookie, coffee feeling to it, things like that. And it is rich. It has a richness to it, but it's not so much that it's overpowering. Because like I said, that's our ethos, to make beers that are very flavorful but aren't overpowering in the same sense. So, does anybody have any questions about Buffalo Sweat? Yes? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's funny that you should mention that. Yes, that is something that happens with stouts, and that is actually something that our brewers have been trying to solve for the past couple months. There's literally a team of guys that are working on getting a better head retention on Buffalo Sweat. That's what it's called, head retention. That one really wasn't a joke. She just thinks that. Just. So yeah, it's kind of characteristic of a beer though, unless you're doing nitrous, which our founder has something against nitrous. I've never got the full story on that, but he does. Unless you're doing nitrous, these kind of beers kind of don't have the head retention. My best advice for it is when you're pouring it, I know people like to, do the perfect pour and things like that, but actually the perfect pour would be patience. Leave the glass down, pour it, let that big head form, wait a little bit, and it just kind of forms this nice, especially with Buffalo Sweat, you'll get this beautifully rocky looking head that's just kind of coming up over the glass. That's not, it's kind of looks almost like a cookie or something in and of itself. So that's my best advice for that, but we are working on getting better head. Yes? Oh yeah, sure. Sorry, I forget the people. She asked why Buffalo Sweat, the head. The other ones had kind of a nice head to them, head retention. This one, when it comes out, it has a decent head on it, but it dissipates quickly, as I'm sure you're seeing. So I was, you heard my answer, but thank you. I'll try and do that. Anybody else have a question? Sure. So I'll go ahead and start talking about the cask a little bit then. So naturally carbonated, when you do these things, it's only going to be natural carbonation. We don't put any CO2 in there. It's all derived just from the sugars that break down in it, which is why they're kind of a gamble. Like I said, you can get one that's just a really angry firkin that'll just squirt all over the place and all that fun stuff. That usually has to do with the more sugar you put in there. Like one of the worst ones I've ever had is our pub ale with blackberries. Whatever it is about the blackberry, the sugars were breaking down in there and it just caused way more carbonation. That's usually not an issue with us. We've been doing firkins since I think 2009 or 2010. So we've been doing them quite a long time, and our cellarman is fantastic. He's totally what you'd expect a cellarman to look like. He doesn't get a lot of sunlight. He has a lot of diplomas on the wall, things like that. So he's constantly down there tinkering, figuring out what, if we're going to do a cilantro and lime tequila halcyon or whatever he wants to do that day, things like that. So he's pretty much got it down to a science. So I let them vent, just like I was talking about, to make sure that there's no excess carbon dioxide on it. But really, he's got it ready to go because he's got it down to such an art that it's like, bam, it's ready to go. It's pretty much a ready-made party in a big giant can. So hope you're all ready to party. But this one, like I said, has candy cane added to it. I'd rather call it peppermint. It plays really well with the Buffalo Sweat, anything like that. And these go excellent with desserts. I know most stouts do, but I take this all the time and give people, I presented, to major brands a couple months ago and brought Oreos for everybody, which I thought about doing tonight, but I didn't have the time, so sorry. But even just an Oreo, you can dunk it in there or something like that, or just with desserts. If you have anybody that thinks they don't like dark beer, give them some pie and some Buffalo Sweat, and I guarantee you'll change their mind. So that's why I think it's so. Do you have a question? But I saw you raise your hand. This is the vanilla, yes. So the vanilla bean that we don't have to taste besides the firkin is just the Buffalo Sweat that has whole Ugandan vanilla beans added to it. So it gives it just a little bit more complexity. And again, if you've had it, it's not an overpowering vanilla. Like I said, we don't ever want to overpower anything that's not our ethos. It's similar, yeah, different region. I'm not into geography, I'm sure. They're pretty close, though. They're around the same area. Yeah, I'm not sure why we went with I think the Ugandan, has a little bit more subtle flavor than Madagascar. So that's probably what we went with that one for. Because it's not, like I said, it's not a bigger beer. Since we mentioned Madagascar, Four Hands Madagascar is a bigger beer and can stand a little bit more. No, I know, but that's why they called it Madagascar, the Four Hands, yeah. They use the Madagascar vanilla bean because I think it has a little bit more punch to it. And that's just a little bit too much for a 5%, kind of a lighter, medium-bodied stout. So it's like I said, we don't want to slap you in the face. We just want to slap your tongue a little bit. So, no, that's just straight Buffalo Sweat. You can get that year-round. Well, the original, fun story. So, original Buffalo Sweat is one of our core beers. It's available year-round. Vanilla Bean is a seasonal. It's available November through February. It actually started because Vanilla Bean Buffalo Sweat was a firkin, and we liked it so much that we decided to make it a beer and do it year-round. So every once in a while we do run into a beer that we like so much in a firkin that we decide to do on a mass scale. That's actually where the Ginger Peach Saison is going to come from later in the year, if you see it. That was a firkin as well. It started with the Halcyon Ginger Peach. So. Short version, yes, that's basically what you do. But as a cellarman, he's going down there and he's constantly running tests. So he's running to see, what the pressure is, things like that. Like I said, we don't want him to get overpressurized. Another fun fact, the first firkin that we did, the bunghole, which is this plastic part right here. I'm not even making this up. It's just it's a bunghole that by Ashley's arm there. The first firkin that we ever did, the bunghole is still embedded in the ceiling of the brewery because we didn't know what we were doing, and it's a rather dangerous process. So that was kind of sidetracked. But yes, it's basically you put it in there, you run the beer in without any sort of carbonation. You add whatever ingredients you want. I'm not sure if he does it in a specific order or something like that. But after that, he's basically letting it age, letting it sit on that, doing tests to see what the carbonation levels are, what it's tasting like. I mean, obviously, if it tastes horrible, he's not going to send it out. So that's basically the process, though.